What if I told you some stories you need to hear to believe?
Everywhere you went, Dan and Dave, Dan and Dave.
And that's these two athletes that are going to go to the Olympics this year, and it's going to be settled in Barcelona.
When Reebok approached Dave and I, the first thing both of us said, neither one of us are on this team yet.
The thought never, ever crossed my mind that Dan nor Dave would not make that Olympic team.
The all-new 30 for 30 podcast. Subscribe now on the ESPN app or Apple Podcasts.
30 for 30 podcast is presented by Mini. We're finding the best sports stories for you right now. And to do that, we're behind the wheel of the new Mini Countryman, the biggest Mini yet.
Please proceed to the highlighted route.
To find great sports stories, you have to get out into the world and follow your instincts. That's where the new Mini Countryman's all-wheel drive comes in handy. With all four, we can chase down a story in the city, the country, and most places in between. No matter what story you're chasing, the new Mini Countryman will help you find it. It's available now, and so are 30 for 30 podcasts.
This is the Best of Mike and Mike podcast. Subscribe now by going to the Listen tab in the ESPN app.
The Best of Mike and Mike.
We are back in better than ever. Mike and Mike, presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance line of Football Friday, the first in November, with baseball behind us now, save for the celebration. A parade today for the world champs in Houston. Booger McFarland is here again today. I love watching parades on television. I personally can't imagine anything worse than going to one in person, unless you are, on the float or the duck boat or whatever it is that is being celebrated. But did you have parades when you won the two championships that you won?
Absolutely. One was tremendous and one was miserable.
I'm going to guess that the miserable one was Indianapolis because it's early February in Indianapolis and you're freezing your little southern took us off.
Greeny, I'll start with the most miserable one, which was the one in Indy. We won the Super Bowl in Miami where it rained all Super Bowl long. It was a great game, fitting because when Tony Dungy got fired in Tampa, they showed a clip on the news. He was carrying the box from his office to his car, and it was pouring down raining. So how ironic was it that we won the Super Bowl down in Miami? It rains. We wake up that Monday, fly back to Indy. Tuesday's parade, 0 degrees.
0
degrees. And they're passing out hoodies for us at the parade. So we get on this float, and we're driving, and everybody's like, yeah, man, this is great. You won the championship. Everybody's lined up. It's snow on the ground. And I'm miserable. I'm in the back of the float. I'm covered up. You can only see my eyes out of this thing. I got a hoodie on, and it's absolutely miserable, Greeny, to the point where that when we got back to the stadium, because the float came downtown, went back inside the stadium. So we're on stage in the stadium, and everybody's kind of warming up. I'm still full hoodie, clothes, locked in.
Booger does not like the cold. For those of you who are new to our show, I mean, people can tolerate the cold. I don't mind it nearly as much as you do. First of all, my definition of cold and yours are totally different.
What's your definition of cold?
I mean, I remember the day that you came up here and you filmed a little Instagram video before you came in the building, and it was like 36 degrees, and you were freezing and snot was running out of your
36
nose.
36 isn't cold?
No, 36 is not cold. 36 is brisk. It's definitely not cold. Let me put it this way. If it were 36 all through the winter, it would be a delight. I mean, there are days that we beg for 36.
Well, Greeny, I beg to differ. 36 is frigid.
Okay, so my point is then 0 in Indianapolis, now you're really struggling.
I was miserable, Greeny.
How about Tampa? How about the Tampa parade?
one was great because it came down Bayshore, which is like the longest uninterrupted sidewalk in the United States. And so the parade came right down that street that ran right next to it. And so it's 70 degrees. It's early February. People are out. We're walking in the parade. So we got off the floats and started walking. It was absolutely phenomenal.
I can't imagine that. So there are many people right now listening to or watching this conversation who live in Florida.
Yes.
They live in Arizona. They live in Southern California or other places like that. I can't imagine what life would be like not to have a winter. Like, it seems too good to those of us who were born and raised in this. I lived all my life either in the New York area or in Chicago. So, I mean, I know from scraping ice off the windshield with a credit card. That's what I know. That's life as I know it in the winter. And it's something that I hate. And as I've gotten older, I hate it more and more. But it's just a part of life. It's something I can't fathom not having to put up with. Yeah. It seems too good. Like, life shouldn't be allowed to be so good that it's 70 degrees in February.
Well, it's not a part of my life to the point where winter in Florida is like this. When the temperature turns anything below 60, people go down to Saks or Neiman's and get their fur coats out of the little pine box that they keep them in. People start wearing leather. They have boots on. Sweaters come out, anything below 60 degrees. 60 degrees up here, everybody's like, it's bombing. They got shorts on. People are running outside with no shirts on.
60 degrees is, in my opinion, is the dividing line between shorts and no shorts on the golf course. You can wear shorts if it's 61. You're wearing longs if it's 59. Now, I happen to like wearing longs all the time. I'll wear longs. My dividing line that is 80. If it's 76, I'll wear longs just because I like it. I feel good wearing long pants. And then it's too warm for that. So my point is, yes, I can't fathom that. That said, folks in Houston, enjoy this. You obviously had some bad sports news yesterday, but you have the biggest sports news of all with the Astros and their celebration parade today. Now let's dive into that bad news because it begins right there in Houston where unimaginably Deshaun Watson tore his ACL in practice yesterday and is out for the season. When that news, I was sitting having dinner with my family last night, and when that news came over, I had to read it like 4 times to make sure there just didn't seem there was anywhere in the world I was reading that right. Deshaun Watson, who was one of the most genuinely exciting, thrilling things that has happened to the National Football League this year or in recent memory, and running off the field in practice from what I'm reading, grabbed his leg, didn't even seem to be a big deal at the time at all, didn't yell with pain or anything. And then they do an MRI, and he's got an ACL, and he's done for the year.
Well, Greeny, he was running a read option play, which is a normal play that Bill O'Brien has put in their system. And so he ran, I think it was to the right, and it was a normal play that they ran numerous times in practice, and he kind of pulled up, no screaming, no yelling, no cursing, no slamming the helmet, fell down, called the trainer. They came, checked it out. Next thing you know, his practice is over. Practice goes on. Guys started finding out later on via the wire, news, and Twitter, whatever, that Deshaun Watson had torn his ACL. This is the opposite ACL that he tore at Clemson. So now you have a quarterback whose mobility is a big part of his game, who now he's torn both ACLs, one in 2014 in college and now one in 2017 in the National Football League.
This is heartbreaking. I don't want to overstate it. Like, he's a young man, and he'll rehab, and he'll come back, and he'll be fine. But you know, in a football season that needs as many good stories as it can possibly find, I don't know that there's a better one right now than what this kid has done in Houston. And for it to end like this in practice, it's impossible to believe.
For a league that had gone through so much with the off-the-field concerns, with the kneeling, with the anthem, with the president, this was a feel-good story. This was a guy that was coming in, and he was getting praise from everyone, Greeny. Everyone liked Deshaun Watson. And you can see what happened yesterday on Instagram and Twitter and social media, the outpouring of support for him. He was well-liked, and it's not too often that you get a guy that's liked by almost everyone in the National Football League. So that's why this one hurts so hard.
Yeah, again, he'll come back, I'm sure. And the way the medical technology is now, he'll come back, and he'll be strong, and he'll be fine. And I'm sure he'll have a great career. But this was just startling news yesterday. Not quite as surprising was the news that Andrew Luck's season is over. He's got the shoulder. He's going to go on the injured reserve. He will not play at all this year. And you'll hear Steve Young a little bit later in this program, as he was saying yesterday. There's legitimate concern right now about Andrew Luck's future. A shoulder for a quarterback is just not a good situation.
You know, Greeny, sometimes injuries are bad luck. Sometimes injuries are bad timing. But in my opinion, sometimes injuries can be self-induced, not by Andrew Luck, but by the coach. Greeny, they've surrounded this young man by a miserable offensive line, by pretty much a terrible supporting cast, and you can go back to Ryan Grigson. I know he's no longer the GM, but it starts with Ryan Grigson, with the amount of money that they haven't put around the offensive line. The number one thing in football you do, when you get a franchise quarterback, when you get Aaron Rodgers, when you get Tom Brady, you surround them with players. They've not done that with Andrew Luck. And so in my opinion, yeah, it can be bad luck, but a lot of it can be self-induced by the organization for the lack of support they put around this young man, Greeny.
It's a devastating blow there for them, and their season is going the direction it's going. They'll wind up with a very high draft pick.
Off the top.
We'll see what happens there. Okay, Lonzo Ball held scoreless in 28 minutes of action last night. It's the most minutes by a rookie top 5 pick without scoring since 1992. It's the first time in his NBA or one-season college career that Lonzo Ball has ever been held scoreless in a game. How big a deal should be made of this?
I don't think it should be a big deal. He's never been a prolific scorer. He's a guy that's a floor general. He's an assist guy. He's going to defend. He's long, athletic. Like, people are making a big deal out of his scoring like he's Russell Westbrook. He's never going to be a scoring point guard. I don't think it's a big deal. Do you?
Well, no. I mean, to be held scoreless in one game is not a big deal, no. But what has happened, one of the for better or worse, one of the byproducts of his father's constant talking is that every game the kid plays becomes a referendum on everything.
Right.
It becomes a referendum on the brand, and it becomes a that one game against when they where he's not going to lose twice in a week and all that kind of stuff. And Washington was coming in, and they won that game in overtime. I felt like we should lead the show with it. It was such a big deal. It was a regular season game between the Lakers and the Wizards, and it felt like it had like championship implications. So everything is a little bit magnified, perhaps beyond the perspective that it deserves when it comes to Lonzo
Some of
Ball.
that's our doing, though, Greeny. Some of that is because we have bought into the brand. We have bought into LeVar, and now we watch Lonzo with a closer eye. And I think that if we're going to give this kid his fair share, we have to allow him to be a rookie. He's an assist-first point guard. He's never going to be a guy that's going to average 25, 10, and 11. He's not going to do that. So allow him to grow into who he's going to be, which I think he's going to be a very good player.
Off the top.
The Warriors came from 19 down to beat the Spurs last night in the first meeting of the season between these two teams. It remains the most interesting matchup, I think, in the NBA's Western Conference. And we'll see what Oklahoma City turns out to be this year, and we'll see what Houston turns out to be this year, and all these other. But right now, the marquee remains on Golden State and San Antonio. And again, it's the Warriors 19 down, and they come back to win.
Well, I'm not really paying much attention to this. The Spurs are still without Kawhi Leonard. He's got that quad injury. But there is a neat little stat. Himbo, you were talking about the stat where the Spurs, this is the first time they've been, near 500, or Popovich has been close to 500?
He's getting it for you right now.
Okay, yeah. So it's amazing how good they've been. But I'm not paying a lot of attention to this right now because Kawhi Leonard is out.
Yeah, this isn't what the Spurs are ultimately going to be.
Off the top.
But as it goes in November, basketball is a pretty interesting little night. And that brings us to the Jets and the Bills on Thursday Night Football. Let's call that off the top.
I knew you were going to do that.
Presented by Progressive Insurance. You could save hundreds on your car, your business, or your recreational vehicle insurance from a local independent agent. Go to Progressive.com today. Now that's Progressive. The Buffalo Bills, who were the talk of the league coming into this week. Jeff Saturday on our show Monday said, at noon yesterday I was selling the Bills, and by 6 o'clock last night I was buying the Bills. Everyone in the world was jumping on the Buffalo bandwagon, and they showed up last night at MetLife Stadium to face the New York Jets, who, look, I'll give them credit. They're an undermatched team, or an overmatched team, I guess I should say, whose franchise, whose overall leadership viewed this as a rebuilding year and a strip it down to the studs kind of year. But a lot of those kids are playing. They've got a bunch of young guys who are playing hard. They have a couple of veterans, namely Matt Forte and Josh McCown, who both played great last night, who are playing hard and aren't letting this team sort of fold. And they win last night in a game that was decidedly one-sided. They win. That game is 34-7 at one point last night, and they get to 4-5. The Jets are having, I would say, by any standard of measure, an astonishingly good year.
No doubt they are. And if you're looking around the National Football League and you want to know what the consummate professional, what the consummate backup quarterback looks like, look no further than Josh McCown. He's never going to be a consistent starter year in and year out. But what he's doing right now is showing you how to be a professional. He played well last night. People always say he's sneaky athletic. No, he's just athletic. The guy's good. He keeps his body in great shape. But last night, to me, was less about McCown and the offense and more about the Jets' defense. People started tweeting out about the New York Sack Exchange and how that defensive line played back in the day. And last night's defensive line reminded people of that. They blitzed a lot, 7 sacks. They were all around Tyrod Taylor. They made life miserable for them. But the number one thing they did, Greeny, they did not allow the Buffalo Bills to run the football. Only had 63 yards rushing. So they took the run game away. And Buffalo has kind of prided themselves so far this season on being a physical football team. They took the physicality to Buffalo, made Tyrod Taylor try to win the game. He threw 40 passes. That's not the recipe for Buffalo. And I think if you're Coach McDermott and you're Buffalo, you got to kind of go back and understand who you are. You're a running football team that's going to play defense. Your quarterback should not throw the ball 40 times. He's not that guy. If he's throwing it 25 times, I think they're in great shape. Last night was a referendum on how they should not play football.
And as far as it's interesting for those who've watched the Jets play this year, their defensive line, which should, on paper, be the strength of their team. It should be their strongest unit, has actually, for the most part this year, been very disappointing. Yeah. All the talk was about how they didn't have a sack on the entire season going into last Sunday's game, which they ultimately ultimately lost to Atlanta in a rainstorm. They lost 3 tough games in a row. The Jets were 3-2 for those of you who are not following, and why would you? This was not a team that people were paying much attention to before the season began. But they were 3-2, and then they lost a game to New England that they could have won. They were up 14-0 early, and it was close all the way through. They lost a game to the Dolphins that they absolutely should have won.
Yes.
They were up 14 points in the fourth quarter. They lost a game last week to Atlanta that they could have won, and then last night they go out and they just blitz Buffalo in a very impressive, as you say, defensive performance, and they were physical on the offensive side, and they ran the ball. So who knows what to make of it. For the Jets, it's a nice win, and Todd Bowles afterwards was talking about what it means for his team.
It's big because we lost 3, 7 points, 5 points, 3 points. To come back on a Thursday on a short week before you get a weekend off is big. Division opponent. Again, we were 3-5. We needed to get to 4-5. Hopefully we can get to 5-5 next week, but it was big.
So that's that for Todd Bowles. For those of you who don't know him well, that's about as much as you're going to get out of him. That's about as insightful as he's going to be in a moment like that, which is fine. I've said it many times. For the guys who coach the teams that I root for, whether it was the bombastic Rex Ryan or Eric Mangini, who was practically a mute up there, or Bowles, who I really don't care. You don't have to say anything as far as I'm concerned. Just win games. Right. And this year the Jets have won more games and have played better than I think any of their fans had any expectation.
No doubt. And as far as Todd Bowles is concerned, some people will make a lot about his demeanor, Greeny. Tony Dungy had a very similar demeanor, very stoic at the podium, didn't really get too high, get too low. So I don't really pay much attention to that. I watch how his team plays and performs for him. Watch how they go into the field. Watch their emotional level. Watch how they fight. And this team has fought hard all season, so they're responding to their coach. I like Todd Bowles. I just wish he had a consistent franchise quarterback that he could build around, because we all know that Josh McCown is just a stopgap to the next guy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, look, what they have here is not sustainable.
Right.
What they have here is a 38-year-old quarterback who has lifted this team. He has done for them exactly what Ryan Fitzpatrick was hoped to do last year. When the Jets brought back Fitzpatrick to try and catch lightning in a bottle when they had all those veterans and they were coming off a year in which they had won 10 games, they were hoping that he would play like this. If this Josh McCown had been the quarterback of the Jets last year, they would have had a vastly different season and things would be entirely different. But you're right. Josh McCown isn't the quarterback of the Jets' future, which will lead people to wonder whether winning these games is actually helping them or hurting them in the long run. I'm going to take the side of helping them. There's no way in the world they're getting one of the top 2 or 3 picks now anyway, because they're way better than Cleveland. They're way better than San Francisco. They're way better than the Colts. So they have no chance of finishing like with a top 3 pick. So at this point, win games. Let your young players win games. Let there be that kind of a good feeling. I think if the Jets actually managed to be a 500 team this year, it would be a colossal accomplishment. Right. They have a ton of money to spend in free agency, and then we'll see how they go about trying to address the quarterback position, which you are right. McCown is not going to be their quarterback whenever it is that they put together a team that they hope can win a championship.
They're going to get a quarterback, Greeny, in this draft, I think, and I think they're going to get a good one, because I think a lot of people are going to be torn on the guys coming out of college. We discussed this yesterday. Baker Mayfield, Donald, Rosen, Allen. There are a lot of guys that are coming out.
I'm going to have to start looking more closely at some of these guys. Baker Mayfield to me, listen, I love the moxie.
Right.
I love a million things about him. But in my, I've always felt that the college game has changed so much now that pro teams are actually emulating what college teams do. But for the longest time, there have been basically 2 different kinds of college quarterbacks. Ones who were great college players and ones who translated to the NFL.
Right.
Mayfield I've always viewed as a guy who was a great college quarterback who did not necessarily translate to the NFL. Now, the more people you talk to, the more you hear them say, look, he can throw it from the pocket. They just don't ask him to do it very much. Are you telling me he can do that? He's a first-round pick?
I think Baker Mayfield is going to be viewed as a first-round pick by some. And I think, Greeny, when you start to look at guys on the professional level that are similar, look at Alex Smith, mobile guy, can throw on the move, can throw from different platforms. I'm not comparing him to Aaron Rodgers, but look what Aaron Rodgers does. He's not always sitting back there. Yes, he can throw it on time. He can throw it in rhythm. But a lot of quarterbacks nowadays are moving. Look who the Kansas City Chiefs drafted, Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
He's a guy that's a gunslinger, a guy that's going to throw it from different angles, run all around the pocket. So the National Football League is moving away from just having the 6'5", 250 guy that can stand in one spot and sling it. What I'm saying is this, is that the Jets have wasted a lot of picks, Hackenberg and the
Bryce
Petty, all these quarterbacks. they're going to have an opportunity to waste another one. If they choose to, they'll have an opportunity to either find a good quarterback or they'll waste another one. Either way, I think they're going to have to draft a quarterback, and they will get one if they're picking in the top 10 or 15 because I think there are enough quarterbacks to go around.
On the Buffalo side of things last night, that was a bad loss, and the numbers are somewhat, well, they're purely coincidental, but they don't spell anything good for the Buffalo Bills. Twice since the last time they made the playoffs. The Bills haven't made the playoffs in this millennium. The last time they made the playoffs was 1999. Twice since then, they've started 5-2.
Right.
Each of those previous 2 times, their 8th game was against the Jets. They lost, and they wound up under 500 on the season. So here they are, another edition of the Buffalo Bills, 5-2, 8th game against the Jets, and they lose. We'll see what happens from here on out. For the purposes of last night, Sean McDermott, frustrated.
This is uncharacteristic of this team to date. The way we've played so far, we've got to learn from it. We got outcoached, we got outplayed. Fundamentally, we weren't very good. And then you look at the penalties. Some of those were, you could call them aggressive, a few of them. But other than that, it was you can't do that and expect to win a game in the NFL. So we've got to get better. We'll learn from this, and no excuses. We give credit to the opponent, to the Jets. They beat us straight up tonight.
I mean, Greeny, their formula was not there. Okay, Tyrod Taylor is a guy, we said it again, and the stat is the last 6 times Tyrod Taylor has attempted 35 or more passes, the Bills have lost. Like, he just can't do that. Like, they cannot throw the football consistently like a Green Bay, like a New England Patriots team. They have to run the football. And I think Sean McDermott knows that. I'm not going to make a referendum based off the statistics and say, here we go again, the Buffalo Bills are going down the wrong rabbit hole. What I'll say is this, is they have to go back, find what their formula is, figure out how to run the football, keep Shady McCoy healthy, and now allow Tyrod Taylor to throw the football 15, 20 times a game. Get your defense playing a lot better, and I think they'll win some of these games.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Mike and Mike Booger is here. Jam-packed morning. I got 2 stats for you on the Jets, and then I have 1 on the Bills. On the Jets' future, there are reasons to be optimistic, and here are some others. They are a very young team. There are only 3 players on the roster over the age of 30, and they have $45 million in projected cap space for next year, which is the second most of any team in the NFL. So they have money, Booger, not only to draft a quarterback if they want one, but they could also go out and spend their money on a free agent quarterback if they chose to go that route.
Greeny, here's what I'll say. You're not going to find your franchise quarterback in free agency because most of the time, if the quarterbacks are any good, they're re-signing with their original team.
Well, again, the unique circumstance here is Kirk Cousins.
That's a unique one, but are they willing to overpay for Kirk Cousins? I mean, are they willing to give Kirk Cousins $25, $28 million a year? Or are they willing to draft a Mayfield, a Rosen, an Allen, or a Darnold? To me, that'll be the key. But they do need a franchise quarterback. As far as the stat you just read about being young and having a lot of money, that's what they should be right now, Green. Like, when you're a bad team, you want to be young. You want to have plenty of wealth to spend. Now it's up to the brass in the front office to spend it on the right guys and build the team the right way.
That's Mike McCagnon. And there are 8 teams right now in the NFL that are currently 3-5 or worse. Of those, the Browns are the only one without a stable or permanent quarterback in place. So what that would suggest is that many of the teams who will be picking at the top of this draft, or at least who will have that selection, aren't going to be in the quarterback market. Now, that's a bit deceptive because one of those teams, obviously, Hembo, as you sent me the stat, one of them you're talking about is the Giants. I'll be very interested to see what the Giants do. They clearly have a stable quarterback in place. But what do they think of that? Which direction are they planning on going with that? I haven't seen all of the teams at this point. In Cleveland, we assume they'll be in the quarterback draft market again. So we'll see. So it's going to be a very interesting, I think, the draft, that period where teams start making their trades. We've seen a lot of big trades at the top of the draft in recent years with quarterbacks available. I think we'll see it again.
I wouldn't be surprised if New Orleans took a quarterback. I wouldn't be surprised if Indianapolis took a quarterback with everything going on with Andrew Luck. There are teams that we think that have a quarterback, the New York Giants, that I think are going to take a quarterback, realizing that this may be a draft rich in QBs, and the next couple years may not be.
So we'll see where that thing winds up and a whole lot more. Then there's a lot of Twitter reaction through the 1-800-Flowers.com Twitter feed to a variety of things, including our talk about the temperature.
Yes.
Rick tweets, anything less than 70, I'm wearing a hoodie and jeans. It's 85 today, he writes, in South Georgia. See, Rick and Booger and all of you, I can't fathom what life would be like that. Like, to me, in November, it starts to get cold. Yeah. In December, it's cold. January, February, March, it's cold. I worked with a guy years and years and years ago in Chicago named Jim Memolo. And he would do the sportscasts and during the radio show. And I would do those sometimes too. So I'd listen. I was a young kid doing it, and he was older than me and good at it. And I would listen to him. And they wanted us to do a weather forecast at the end of the sportscast. And I'll never forget one year. This is Chicago now.
Right.
And this was like in December. And he said, the forecast, it's going to be cold until April. Deal with it. And he was exactly right. That's the weather. There's no need for a weather forecast in Chicago. Starting in December and until like the end of March, it's going to be cold as hell. That's it. That's how cold. That's what the weather is going to be. It's either going to be really cold or it's going to be unbearably cold.
Right.
That's what it's going to be. So if it's 85 today in South Georgia, that just seems too delightful.
Oh, it's great, Greeny.
That's what I mean.
It's tremendous.
Life isn't supposed to be that good. TJ tweets, I work outside, up in the air. A 36-degree winter would be downright tropical. Yeah, see, that's the thing. If you were for people who work outside,
right,
and then they're in the winter and they're out there work, I mean, it's tough. I don't know. If I were a person who worked outside, I would live where you live.
Well, no doubt about it. And I don't mind the air cooling off a little bit, which is why this morning.
Again, your definition of cooling off and mine are very different.
Prime example. Like, it cooled off a little bit this morning. It was 60 degrees when I woke up this morning here in Bristol.
Oh, what is this? Like an Arctic chill?
No, well, it was like, to me, it was kind of cool.
It's the warmest day we have left in 2017, okay?
To me, it was kind of cool. So, Greeny, which leads me to my story. I woke up about 4 a.m. this morning.
Uh-oh.
And I'm like,
because I saw you tweeted.
Yes, it's been a long morning already.
It's been a long morning.
Yes, I got up at 4 a.m. And the first thing I said, you know what? I'm up early. It's a little early to go over to the studio. Greeny's still in the bed probably, so there's really no need for me to head in. So I said, you know what? I'm going to go for a run. So I do what most people do when you get up in the morning. I go in the bathroom, handle my business, take care of all that. Now I'm going for my run. Problem is, Greeny,
Did you need to share that part of it?
Yes, because most of America.
And the telling of that story.
Most of America does this. Yes.
No, I'm not suggesting. Everyone knows everyone does this. My point is, in the telling of that story, unless that winds up coming back and playing some role in the story,
it's going to come back. Pay attention.
I'm listening.
So
now that's foreshadowing.
Yes, exactly. So I take off on my run. I'm going to run about 1.5 miles, 2 miles.
Sure.
And I get lost. And it's kind of hard.
You're running outside?
Yes, I'm outside.
Oh, I thought you meant on a kind of treadmill. They have a gym in this hotel, right?
No, yes, this is the DoubleTree across the street.
Okay, but you're running outside.
I want to go outside because it's cool. It's 60 degrees.
Right.
I can run a little longer. I feel good. I get lost. And not only do I get lost, about halfway through the run, I realized that what I thought I finished in the morning, I didn't finish.
Oh. So it does come back.
Yeah, it comes back, Greeny.
Comes full circle.
Yes, and so now I'm passing by a convenience store, and the store is closed, or maybe the guy just didn't want to open the door because I had like a skull cap on because it's cool, but it's not quite warm enough for me. And so I knock on the door, the lights are on, but nobody comes to the door. So now I'm lost. I make a left turn, and all I see is a light like a mile away. And I'm like, okay, that's got to be Middle Street, which leads me back to the hotel. And I'm like, can I make it? And so I take off running. About halfway, I said, no, I got to stop.
Oh, no.
I
don't like where the story is going.
Okay, I stop. I paused for a moment, and I said, you know what? Fight the urge. You have to fight this urge.
With everything you have.
And I fought it, Greeny. I fought it with everything I had.
Being.
And I had to stop for a minute and just mentally focus, and I did. And then I took back off again. I got to the light, and I could see the hotel. And I said, you know what? I've made it. And then out of nowhere comes like this 18-wheeler down the street, blows a puddle of water on the sidewalk, hits me. And I'm like, you know what? And I lost focus for a minute. I said, you know what? You got to go back. Lock in. Fight it. Because once again, I'm not finished. I got to get back to the room. So luckily, Greeny, I made it back to the room, and I was able to finish what I started. But I got lost, and I probably ran 3 miles when I only meant to run 1.5 miles. So it's been a long morning.
That is remarkable.
It's been a long morning. The mental focus that was happening between 4 and 5 a.m. by me was tremendous.
I'm very impressed. I mean, that actually is a good story because those are terrible moments.
Oh, they are. Have you ever been there?
Have I been there? We've all been there. I mean, as I said, this is a universal function. Okay?
Right. I'm saying, but have you been there on a run or on the golf course where you're like, you know what? Man.
There are any number of places where this is not where the act that you're describing is not convenient.
Yes.
And yes, I have been in those circumstances
what did you do?
As we have all. Well, like you did. I mean, I was just sort of locked in. I mean, you got to do whatever it is you got to do. Nothing with me. I have some stories about when my kids were little that I can tell, but let's not get ourselves completely sidetracked with this. I'm glad everything is all right.
Everything is fine. Everything worked out good.
It reminds me of the story where Jay Billis was doing our show with us one time, and he was staying in that hotel, and there was some sort of mix-up, and the car never went to get him, and he wound up walking here, and he wound up which was remarkable, and he wound up walking past like a dead roadkill on the side of the road and all this kind of stuff, and that's one of those where his dedication was greater than mine. I just would have stayed until the car came. Okay, anyway, we got a lot to get to today. Let's get to the Thursday night piece of this. Mm-hmm. So I was reading a very interesting story this morning from Sean McManus, who was the chairman of CBS Sports and is a very well-known person in the sports industry. And everyone is presenting different theories on what's going on with the National Football League right now and why the ratings are down, or as they were described by an executive from Fox, I think in the same story, soft. The ratings are soft. Right. And he was suggesting that one of the reasons is the Thursday night games. That while the Thursday night game itself is doing reasonably well, the games have been good, and they're certainly making a lot of money out of it, and the ratings have been what they've been. That what it's done is that they try to put a marquee game in that spot pretty much every week. And what that does is it takes away from the Sunday package. Mm-hmm. So what we're all accustomed to, what football has been basically since the beginning of football, and certainly since football started to become what it is now in the 70s, this dramatic rise from what was, a second or third sport in the country to what it is now, which is, a behemoth and a financial, runaway train. Yeah. Last Sunday, there were 2 games in the 4 o'clock spot. Mm-hmm. 2. If you're watching on the Red Zone, you didn't even have, they were constantly going back to the studio and giving you highlights because there were only 2 games. It was the Seattle-Houston game and the Dallas-Washington game, and that was it. Because they got all these teams on buys, and they got a Sunday night game, and we got a Monday night game, and we got a Thursday night game. And so I think that does make sense. I think there is something to be said for that not only has the scarcity of it been removed from the discussion, not only have people's television viewing habits changed, which have impacted ratings in every way. I was looking at a story yesterday that we're talking about the TV ratings for this year's World Series, the second highest rated game since 2002 when it did a 19 share. Game 7 of the 1986 World Series, Mets and Red Sox did a 38 share. So television ratings have just changed in every single way. But I do think that's a factor as well. It's another area where I think some short-sighted gain may wind up costing them in the long run.
Well, and Greeny, and some of that is how we look at it, because I think we expect every game to outrate the game before. We expect every game to have a high rating, and that's just not going to happen. It's inconceivable for every game to rate high. Is there something to the fact that maybe too much access, maybe too many games, maybe too many nights? Well, the NFL used to own Sunday. The NFL would own Monday. Now we're trying to own Thursday. Come playoff time, we're trying to own Saturday also. I understand that. But I just think that we fall into this pattern where we want every game to outrate the game before it, and that's just not going to happen. Are the ratings down? Sure, the ratings are down. We understand that there's a lot going on. There has been a lot going on with the NFL. But I wouldn't go to the point that I would say that the NFL is in dire straits by any stretch of the imagination.
No, dire straits would be dramatically overstating it. When Al Michaels was on with us and he said if you look at the end of the year at the highest rated shows, it's all football games.
Correct.
And that's going to continue. There's just fewer people watching them in the traditional way that we have always measured it in the past, and that's not going to change.
I just saved hundreds of dollars by switching to Geico. I've never felt more alive.
Disclaimer. Geico cannot guarantee you will feel more alive. You either possess functioning respiratory and circulatory systems, or you do not, or you are a zombie. If you are indeed a brain-starved zombie and you would like to save money on car insurance, the Geico legal team applauds your excellent life choices, even in your shambling afterlife. But we strongly encourage you to visit geico.com or download the Geico app. Please stay a minimum of 500 feet away from our large and presumably delicious, delicious brains.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Toasty and warm in the studio with me all morning as our friend Booger McFarland, and Field Yates has made his way in as well. Field, where did you grow up?
I grew up in Massachusetts.
Okay, so to you, what is the demarcation of cold?
Yeah, I'm actually with you on this one. Sorry, Booger. I'm with Greeny here. Yeah, I'd say like 20 and under is cold to me. I mean, it's very chilly.
So what's 36 to you then?
Yeah, I thought that brisk was a fairly appropriate description.
Brisk?
Yeah.
When you can see your breath, that's past
Put it this
brisk.
way, like I can make it, like, coming to work in the morning, if I forget to bring a coat on the way out, like I can survive. I can make it from the car to the office door and walk around campus, even if there's some outdoor walks in 36-degree weather.
What a tough guy you are.
Survive. He said he could survive.
I'm sure the TV audience is thinking to themselves, "Yeah, that's exactly what comes to mind."
People from this who grew up either in the South as you did, or in Southern California, or in Phoenix, or whatever the case may be, where it's always warm. Like, they just have a totally different perspective on life.
Sure.
And neither one is right or wrong. I guess everything is about what you're accustomed to. Like Bill tweets, "I'm with Greeny. 36 and sunny is practically T-shirt weather. Single digits is when it's cold, especially with wind chill." Yeah, to me, 36, if the sun is out outside, is golf weather. I've definitely played golf in 36 degrees and sunny.
No, 50. If there's a 5 in it, I'll play golf. If there's no 5 in the beginning of the number, I'm not playing.
You're done?
Greeny, I didn't own a coat until I started working here 4 years ago. Like, I didn't own any jacket whatsoever. My wife said, "Are you going to get a jacket?" I was like, "For what? It's like 70 and balmy in Florida." She's like, "No, you're going to Bristol." I said, "Yeah, it gets a little chilly up there." She said, "You have no idea."
The one cold day that Tampa had probably the entire year was the day we were supposed to play Old Memorial last year on a Sunday. It was an NFL playoff
like
weekend.
29 degrees.
It was freezing. But guess who played golf that day?
Yeah, you did.
And guess who didn't?
Me.
Exactly. Okay, Field Yates is with us in our studio. Jets-Bills last night. Bit of a surprising finish for a lot of people around the country, I would guess. Let's start with the Jets side of it. It's obviously a team that I follow closely.
Sure.
They've had a startlingly good year. And if you assess where they are right now, they only have a couple of guys who are over 30, but two of them were part of their best players last night, in Josh McCown and Matt Forte. But they have a lot of youth. They have a lot of cap space. They still have a big quarterback question to answer going forward. How would you, as one who assesses teams' personnel overall, assess where the Jets sit in the overall scheme of things?
Well, first of all, at the risk of hyperbole, is Todd Bowles the coach of the year? They're 4-5 in a team that many ticketed to win 4 fewer games than that all season, much less before their bye week in Week 11. Todd Bowles and his staff have done just an incredible job, because when I sit there and look at the personnel on this roster, Greeny and Booger, I still see a lot of holes. I still don't see a bunch of foundational blue-chip players that I can say with conviction are going to be on this roster for the next 5 to 10 years if all goes right. They've got 2 fantastic safeties in Marcus May and obviously Jamal Adams as well. But the quarterback, Josh McCown, has been super steady. He's not their long-term answer. Josh himself knows that. The offensive line played much better last night than it has throughout much of this season. The running backs, though, they still have a sprinkling of players that probably won't be there once the Jets make, that next step into a team that can consistently contend. So that brings me back to the coaching, that this team has been extremely well coached by John Morton, the new offensive coordinator, Todd Bowles, and his staff. I think there has to go off. He won't win the award if they only win 6 or 7 games, because we always give it to a coach that wins 10 or more games. But I don't think we can look past the job that the staff of the New York Jets has done to get these players in a position to compete. And I give them a lot of credit, because they could have probably just mailed it in this year and said, 3-4 wins, that's fine. No big deal, right? No one's going to look at us any differently. We were supposed to be this bad. And here they are competing every single Sunday. Before last night, they had lost 3 straight games by 7 points or fewer. This team's been legit.
I definitely agree with you on that point as far as Todd Bowles. Let me ask you a question. Is there any doubt that they're going to take a quarterback in the first round?
I think it depends on where they fall. Because all of a sudden, I don't have the updated draft order handy after last night, but I'd imagine they're somewhere outside of the top 10 now. And you combine that with...
They're definitely outside the top 10 right now, yeah.
Speculation, I think we can call it, that some of the top prospects aren't shoo-ins to declare, right? Sam Darnold seems to be the one that most people don't know with 100% certainty if he will declare for the 2018 NFL Draft, and the fact that a guy like Darnold has been just below average compared to the own standard he set for himself for USC this season. And I would think that the Jets would be looking long and hard at a rookie quarterback, or a quarterback that could become available in free agency, like a Kirk Cousins. But it's no certainty at this point, just because of how well they're playing.
To your point, Field, the Jets last night became the first team to surpass their over-under win total that Westgate set in Vegas before the season began. Westgate set the Jet over-under at 3.5. I'm not going to lie to you. I would have lost a lot of money. I think I would have bet the under. And they're 4-5, and as you just pointed out, they easily could have won each of their last 3 games that they lost, and maybe should have won 2 of the 3. That said, you just made me think about this, so I jotted it down. If we're going to judge Coach of the Year on teams that have just done more than we were expecting, these are just the names I wrote down.
Yep.
Doug Peterson, Mike Zimmer, Todd Bowles, Sean McDermott, Sean McVay, and Sean Payton. We got to run on Sean's there.
Yeah.
That seems to be the hot name right now for NFL coaches.
Yeah.
Those seem to be the guys. I just quickly popped up the standings. Maybe I'm missing somebody.
The only name that I would add, and not because
Andy Reid.
Andy Reid.
Yeah.
That just not because the Chiefs we thought were going to be bad, but to lose Eric Berry in Week 1.
Yeah.
You cut Jerry Maclin. Like the wizardry on offense that they have run this year has just been terrific. I am a huge fan of what Andy Reid has done in Kansas City, but that's a great list otherwise. And like Todd Bowles belongs in that conversation, even though they have a losing record.
I actually agree with that.
Yeah.
You agree with that, Booger?
No, I do.
I actually do. Yeah. I got to give the guy a lot of credit. And going into the season, I thought he was dead man walking. I didn't think that they wanted him around, and I understood why. And there are still a few in-game things he does that drive me crazy as a fan. But in the final analysis, I agree with you. If you were going to judge a coach on what his team's record is relative to its overall level of talent, I think he has done an excellent job. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. Progressive celebrating 5 years and more than 500 cars donated to vets. To learn more, you can visit keystoprogress.com. And Stanzik is typing up, if you agree it's a coach-quarterback league, the Jets are halfway there. Where are the Bills? They were 5-2 going into last night. Everyone is going to point it out that the last 2 times they were 5-2, they played the Jets in their 8th game and lost and wound up under 500. I kind of believe in this team. I think it was just a bad night. These Thursday night games, especially for the road team, while the road teams have won a lot this year, it still is a little bit of an outlier. I still kind of buy Buffalo this year. Do you?
Yeah, I do. And listen, last night was a flattening performance for them, and the schedule is difficult coming up for Buffalo. I believe
it's brutal.
It's New Orleans next. I think Chargers after that, and then maybe the Patriots.
Kansas City. Here's what they have coming up.
Yeah,
they have home New Orleans.
Yep.
At Chargers, which is a home game. At Kansas City, home New England.
Right.
So that's a pretty tough stretch there, next 4 games.
The next 4 weeks of their season could define whether they actually make that playoff push or whether they sort of hover back around 500 this season. But I'm still believing. And I think Sean McDermott has proven to a lot of people what kind of head coach he is and is going to be in the NFL. You hear his players talking about him, and I get it. Sometimes players say things to the media that are just sort of, vanilla and safe. But these guys have bought all into Sean McDermott. I thought that Mina Kimes' piece that was on ESPN.com and in the ESPN the magazine yesterday about Tyrod Taylor, that essentially said your perception of him might be a Rorschach test as to what you think about what a quarterback should be at the NFL level. I'm a Tyrod Taylor believer.
Yeah,
I think he's underappreciated, and I get it. Last night, you're the quarterback and you lose to a bad team. A lot of fingers get pointed back at you. But if we think this is a coach and quarterback league, which I agree with to a strong extent, Buffalo's on the right track. If I told you before the season they'd be 5-3 halfway through the year, you'd say, all right, that's job well done by those two by that coach and that player. So yes, last night was bad. It's not going to get any easier, but I'm in on Buffalo.
I'm sorry. I heard people talking about that piece yesterday. I haven't seen it yet. Mina's piece. Give me a thumbnail on that. What does that mean? That Tyrod Taylor is a Rorschach test for your view of the quarterback position?
So basically the idea is some people look at Tyrod Taylor and they see a limited player who can, never take you to the next level. Some people look at it and say this is a player who was a backup quarterback who became hit free agency, signed a modest deal, and then gets a subsequent large deal for the Buffalo Bills. And does he fit into the contract of what a normal franchise quarterback is? He's a quarterback that can throw the football, also known for more mobility, design runs and non-design runs. So it's a worthwhile read, and Tyrod Taylor is in some ways a hot-button player.
Yeah.
But they're 5-3, and he's been a big part of it.
Assess him for me, Booger. What is your assessment? What do you see when you look at that Rorschach test?
He's limited when it comes to being able to put the game on his back and say, Tyrod Taylor, win the game. We're going to allow you to throw it 40 to 50 times. I think the numbers bear that out. When he throws it more than 35 times, the Bills are not a very good football team. When he throws it less than that, I think they're 5-1 this year. So if you look at him, Greeny, what he is, he's the new age quarterback, a guy that's limited in the passing game, but he brings athletic ability to the table. He can manufacture first downs on his own. Is he good enough to win? Absolutely. Are you ever going to put him in the top 10 quarterbacks in the league? No. But can you win a Super Bowl with Tyrod Taylor surrounded by the right supporting cast? Absolutely. And I think that's what the vast majority of teams in the National Football League are going to have. You're not going to have Brady, Breeze, Manning. Everybody's not going to have that or Rodgers. You're going to have to win with a guy who is a little bit above average, that you surround him with great talent, which brings me to one of the two quarterbacks that basically their season ended yesterday, and Andrew Luck. to me, people are going to talk about this injury and say, yeah, they may need to go draft another guy and you kind of prepare. Here's the way I look at the Andrew Luck deal. This is self-induced by the coach, okay, because of what they surrounded him with, the lack of offensive line dollars. They're 28th in the NFL with cap money devoted to the offensive line. Yep. Andrew Luck is one of the most hit quarterbacks in the National Football League since he's come in. So how much of the blame do you put on the coach organization? I know Ryan Grigson is no longer there, right, but on this organization for where this young player is now.
Right. It's almost like a tale of two regimes, right? Because you can look at what has happened since Chris Ballard was hired as our GM this offseason, and I could say to you, like, I'm not sure what he could have done within his power to help Andrew Luck get back on the field, right? Andrew Luck was already hurt by the time that Chris Ballard took over as the GM. I think the question that a lot of people are asking is probably this, is why is it that this injury, which occurred in 2015, did not result in surgery until the offseason of 2017, or the offseason 2016 leading into 2017. Specific, though, to the roster, which is going to be in the hands of Chris Ballard, there's always an emphasis on protecting your quarterback, and there is, as we talk about frequently in any NFL programming, there is a lack of quality offensive linemen. But the impetus for Chris Ballard to draft or develop or spend big in free agency on offensive linemen probably just magnified and grew when we got this news yesterday, because Andrew Luck is the most important piece of this franchise. Without him, they have 2 wins against the 2 teams in the NFL that are winless, the Browns and the 49ers. Otherwise, like they are one notch above the Browns and 49ers for perspective on how bad this team has been this year. With him, they're a team that, if you had Andrew Luck on this roster right now, you might say, given the other news in the AFC South yesterday related to a quarterback, they might be the team to beat in this division. He is just that valuable to this roster. I don't think there's many silver linings in losing. I think the Jets are a good testament. Like, people are like, yeah, they should just lose. Well, it's hard to tell 53 grown men to just lose every Sunday or every Thursday night. But I do believe that the silver lining, if there is one, is that Indianapolis is now tumbling towards 3rd, 4th, 5th overall pick in the draft. And if there's a surefire, terrific offensive lineman, might be theirs for the taking. Or Saquon Barkley, or somebody else that could infuse some talent to that offense. All of a sudden, they're right there.
They just don't seem like a very physical team to me, Green. Like over the last couple of years when you watch the Colts, and we kind of had that stigma when I played there. It was like basketball on grass with Peyton Manning, which is one of the reasons why Tony traded for me, to try to bring some physicality there and help the run defense out. But over the last couple of years, they don't seem physical offensively or defensively on the line of scrimmage, and it shows a lot. And to me, like, that's their biggest issue.
Yeah, they can't get any push up front. And Frank Gore, we all have incredible reverence for Frank Gore, might go into the Hall of Fame one day, but they have no explosive plays in the running game right now. Marlon Mack, who they drafted out of South Florida this year, has given them some of that of late, but it's hard to watch the Colts on offense, right? Like Jacoby Brissett obviously it was baptism by fire for him. You get traded on Labor Day weekend and you're the starter by week 2. But the offensive line is bad. They don't scare you, and that's the one thing that I thought the Jets did last night, to just sort of use a recent example. Like, they imposed their will against the Bills last night. They controlled the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. That's why you run for 200 yards. And everything else can look a lot different. Like, your quarterback play can look a lot different. Your secondary can look a lot different if the 5 guys up front on offense and the 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 guys up front on defense are winning their battles consistently.
Mike, let's get some Straight Talk here, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, best phones, best networks, no contracts. A very interesting thing happened this week. And it got very little attention because it happened on a winless team. Myles Garrett is the number 1 pick in this year's draft. And the questions that came up about Garrett when we were going through the draft process, and you had some of them, Booger, as much as absolutely anyone.
Yes.
And this is a phrase that people in the sport love to use. Does he love football? Yeah. And what does that really mean? What it really means is he willing to give up absolutely everything to play it? So Myles Garrett this week self-diagnosed a concussion. He self-reported a concussion. And I'm fascinated to see what the overall reaction is going to be to that around the league, because the reaction should be good for him. Good for him. This is the one issue that we cannot have in football. Right. Young football players should learn from that. If you're a high school football player, you should learn from that. This guy's the number 1 pick in the draft, right, and he felt like he had a concussion, and he self-reported it. But I guarantee you that in offices around the league, there are guys going, see, That's why I didn't buy into him. I want my players, and I'm quoting Brian Urlacher on our show right now, but we know there are a million others who said, I would hide that with everything I had. I would make sure no one knew I had a concussion. I would do everything I could to try and hide the fact that I had a concussion so I can get out there and play on Sunday. And so I think that is an interesting litmus test. A, the players who would versus wouldn't self-report a concussion in 2017, and B, the reaction that people have to it. Booger, your thoughts?
Greeny, I think there's going to be a line, and there's a public perception and a private perception. The public perception is going to be just what you said. Great for Myles Garrett. This is what you should do. This is what we want our players to do. Yep. But when you close that door in the locker room, there are a lot of players going to look at him and say, you soft. You're really soft. You know why? Because how many times do you think I've gone on the field with my bell a little rung? How many times have you think I've gone on the field with my faculties not really all there? But now here you are, the number one pick. We've guaranteed you $30+ million, and now you're going to self-report a concussion when we're trying to battle from this hole we're in? That's going to be the private perception inside the locker room, and not a lot of people are going to be willing to say it publicly because they'll get ridiculed by the people that are going to say, yeah, but it's your head, it's your brain. That's most important, and I think that's the difference that we're going to see. Publicly, everybody's going to say the right thing, but when that door closes in that locker room, there are a lot of guys that play with broken bones, that play with pain, that play with so many different things, bleeding, and here's this guy he's going to go tell the doctors, you know what? I don't really feel good today. My bell's kind of wrong. Well, you know what? Guess what? My bell was wrong a lot. And maybe I was wrong for playing through that. I've seen several guys on my team play through that, and I've never seen a guy self-report it. Is it the right thing to do? Absolutely. Is it the wrong thing perceptionally in the locker room? Absolutely also.
If I'm not mistaken, one of his comments was something about, children in his future one day and, wanting to make sure that he was there for them. And
it sounds like Derrick Rose almost.
Which is exactly where I was going to go.
Exactly. Remember
and that was
the
if I'm not mistaken, that may have been one of the turning points in the Derrick Rose Chicago Bulls era. Derrick Rose, obviously the former MVP, and there was a time where people thought they might have a statue next to Jordan for Derrick Rose if things went as they had hoped for in Chicago, as you know better than anybody, Greeny. And all of a sudden, now that's a point. That is a quote that Derrick Rose will never be able to detach himself from in the mind of some Bulls fans, is that he was thinking about his young son based off of his knee injury, where you should be thinking about getting back out there and, dribble drive and kicking out to whoever the Bills or whoever his Bulls teammates were. And for Myles Garrett, maybe this goes somewhat unnoticed because the Browns have so many other almost comical storylines surrounding them, not the least of which is that AJ McCarron trade that was
not. Oh, my God, yeah.
Yes. But, that people need to go back and watch the video of Schefter on your show yesterday or whatever it is. Yeah, yesterday morning.
It was yesterday.
Wow. But I think Booger has pinned the tail on the donkey here, right? We should applaud him for what he's doing. We, on the outside, have every right to applaud him and should applaud him for what he is doing. I also think that one of the realities, there may be some guys on that team that are saying, you know something? Not sure I would have done that myself.
A lot of guys on that team also might be saying it, and if Mike Golick was sitting here, I know he'd be saying it, that I don't have the luxury of doing that.
Yes.
Because he's the number one pick in the draft. When he feels okay, he's getting right back on that field.
Right.
If Mike Golick had self-reported a concussion during his career as a 10th-round draft pick who was fighting just to stay on the field, he might never get back on the field.
He'd be cut, probably.
He might get cut.
Yeah.
See, and that's the thing. So you've got a whole bunch of different people whose perspective on this needs to change if we're really going to attack this problem. We either have this could be a line of demarcation here, guys. We have to decide: do we really care about head injuries in football or not? Do we or do we not? Because if we do, then if there is a price to be paid for self-reporting a concussion, if the price to be paid for self-reporting concussion is the general manager and the people who run the front office and everyone else saying, you know what, that guy's not tough enough, that's not the guy we want on our team, get rid of him, then no one's going to do it.
Right.
And what it means is that we're really not taking this seriously. We're saying we take it seriously.
Right.
We're making the quote-unquote politically correct statement about head injuries, but we don't really care. Myles Garrett can do anything. He's got a huge guaranteed contract. He's the number one pick in the draft. He runs no risk of not getting an opportunity when he comes back. What has to change, if we're really going to change the way this works, is that same zero risk has to apply to every player in the locker room.
But it doesn't, though, Greeny, because every player in the locker room, if every player, let's say guy 52, okay, who's a special teams guy,
right.
He's a foot soldier, okay, let's say he has a concussion, he self-reports. Let's say he's out 2 weeks. guess what? That's 2 weeks of a roster spot that's taken up by a guy that, you know what, is really interchangeable.
True.
So every player's not afforded the luxury of a Myles Garrett that's been the number 1 overall pick and guaranteed $30+ million. So it's never going to be equal when it comes to that. Some guys are just going to have to suck it up. And Golick would tell you, when you're a foot soldier, you have to do things that the number 1 picks just can't do. You have to do things that the number 1 picks don't have to. And so you have to understand that the football mentality, most of the coaches in the National Football League are not millennials. They're of the old school mentality. The guy that I played for, Rob Marinelli, he would tell you, listen, hamstring on a nose guard, not acceptable. Otherwise, play through it. There are things you have to play through, especially as a defensive lineman. We're the tough guys on the field. We're the physical guys. And no matter how you look at it, there are guys in that locker room. There are guys on the Browns coaching staff. They're going to call this young man soft. They'll never say it publicly, but privately, I guarantee they're going to say it.
Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable 4G LTE networks. Yes, the same people who couldn't get the information about their trade for AJ McFarland into the league in time will be describing how Myles Garrett got this one wrong. Field, final word.
I can't get over that story. And what's crazy to think about the Browns and Bengals trade that was or was not is that, like, we may not know all the information yet. Like, there might be more layers to this that have come out. But like, I also think that if part of the spin is that, like, emails couldn't be, like, coordinated, like, if the idea there is to say that so that people in the public sort of buys it, and it's like, oh, now I get why this trade couldn't have gone through. Come on. You expect me to buy that the reason why this trade couldn't go through was simply because a couple of emails got crossed?
Because the Wi-Fi didn't work all of a sudden?
Come on, as someone has pointed out many times, like, the Browns front office is made up of, like, Sashi Brown, who the football czar there. He was a Harvard law guy. Come on. I don't buy, like, to me, something smells very funny. And I think people should go back and watch Schefter's video again from this show yesterday morning. Listen to it, watch it. It's a bizarre story.
We'll play that. You know what? You make a good point. We should play that back again, and we will, coming up later here this morning. Field Yates, we will see you later as well. The podcast, give me the podcast information.
Fantasy Focus Football Podcast. We're going to preview every single game today.
The best of Mike and Mike.
The topic we had a little earlier about Myles Garrett is a really important one. If you're just joining us, Myles Garrett, number 1 pick in the draft, self-reporting a concussion. And again, I applaud him for it, but while fully recognizing that one of the reasons he can do it is that when he comes back, he's going to get right back on the field. He's the first pick in the draft, and there are tons of players in his locker room and locker rooms all around the league that if they give up their spot for any reason, inclusive of this one, they may never get it back. And that's one of the reasons they'd hide it. But there are also guys who could be in the position that he's in who would still hide it. Brian Urlacher, I'll never forget, told us, remember where we were sitting. We were on the set at the Super Bowl. And he was sitting there and he said, this is right when this topic started becoming a big deal. And he said, man, I would hide it. I would hide it from everybody. I wouldn't tell a soul. I would do everything I could not to let anyone know that my head hurt or that my bell was rung, because it would mean that they would take me off the field. And that's the mentality that a lot of football people want football players to have. And therein lies the dichotomy, because that is exactly the wrong perspective for football players to have if we want to make any dent in the serious problem we have with brain injury.
Greeny, you know what doesn't last? Guys who make a lot of money, they get hurt. Okay? I'm a living example of that. All right? I was making a lot of money in the NFL. Tore my tricep, missed 8 games one year, missed a couple of other games because of an ankle, and lo and behold, when I hurt my knee in Indianapolis, you know what? Yeah, his career is probably over. Bill Polian called me one day, and I'm on the 15th hole on a par 5, and he cuts me. And I never played again. I came back, and I was
healthy. Played golf again, just to be clear. Just the way you said that, it made it sound like you never – I was on the 15th hole of par 5, and I never played again. You played a lot of golf.
Yeah, I did. As a matter of fact, I finished that round of golf after I got cut. You can't make – money. You can't make a living in the National Football League if you're not on the field. Players realize that. That's not going to change. You know what doesn't last is guys that get hurt. And people who have the perception that you're going to be soft, you're not going to fight through injury. Like, one of the things that you talk about in negotiating with another team or with teams about a contract is, and my agent told me this, we talked about availability, how physically tough he'll fight through injuries. Those are things that come up in contract negotiations.
Of course.
And so players have to understand that, and players do know that.
And these were the conversations they were having about Myles Garrett before the draft.
Yeah.
These were the whispers. It wasn't about watching him on tape. Now, taking plays off and all that was something that people talked about. But the other thing that I heard all over the place was, well, does he love football? Does he love? He's fascinated by dinosaurs. Does he love football? This has nothing to do with the dinosaurs. But if he's going to walk in there and say, my head doesn't feel right, which everyone should be encouraged to do. And if you were a high school football player listening to this conversation right now, you should do that too.
Correct. Because
it is not worth going out there and playing if you have you just said it earlier, but not the whole country is with us at different times of the show. You said a minute ago that injuries are part of football. They're always going to be. We have to accept that. Yep. Yes, we do. And you're going to leave parts of yourself on that football field. That's correct. If you're going to play football long enough, you're going to leave parts of yourself. Mm-hmm. And Mike Golic can't lift his hand up over the top of his head. Yeah. And if you've ever watched Joe Namath or Mike Ditka try to walk, sometimes it's physically painful to watch. So you're going to. Those are the risks you guys take. Yeah. But this brain stuff is not something that you sign up for. And if one of the things that we can do to try to combat it, maybe we can never eliminate it from the game. But if you know you have a concussion, if you take yourself out or if you don't play with a concussion, that's got to help. It just has to. I'm not a doctor, but it has to make a difference. It just has to. And I think that has to be the new normal for pro football, one way or the other. I don't know how we get there, but they have to get there.
Well, I'll tell you how you get there. You have to change the old guard. And by the old guard, I mean the old coaches that have been around 30 or 40 years that when you diagnose a concussion by saying, hey, how many fingers do I have up? Okay, you're good. Get back in there.
Right.
Those days are gone, but the old guard is still in there. Like, you have to change the coaches and the people and the culture. The millennials have to become coaches. The young coaches, like a Sean McDermott, like a Sean McVay. You have to change those guys to have them aware of it. And so until that changes, it's not going to change.
All right. Don't forget, we got college football action tomorrow. At Auburn taking on Texas A&M. That's presented by Goodyear. The coverage starts 11:30 a.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio, ESPNRadio.com, and on the ESPN app. We are presented by Progressive Insurance, and a great guest list still to come this morning on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line, including Stu Gatz and Joey Galloway and Tim Tebow and AJ Hinch, the manager of the World Series champion Houston Astros. But while we have a moment here, I wanted to wish a very hearty good luck to our colleague Dan Stanzik, otherwise known as Stan Zick.
Yes.
Because for the first several years that he worked here, I thought his name was Stan Zick. I thought his last name was just Zick because people always just described him as Stanzik.
Did you not talk to him and find this out?
Evidently not.
Oh.
And so I honestly, I mean, this is years. How long are you working here, Stanzik? How long have you been at ESPN? How long have you been working here? Just say it. I mean, you could just say it out loud. Where are you typing it up? December of 2008. So that's 9 years. And on our show, how long?
He could say it again. But
August of 15. Boy, you're getting very specific here. I don't need, like, dates. All right, so something like 2 years. For the longest time, I thought his name was Stan Zick. Well, one way or another.
Yeah.
He is running the New York Marathon Sunday. Mm-hmm. So good for him. He's run one marathon in his life before. And he said that his goal is to run this in 3.5 hours.
He said 3:30, and I thought that was the time it started. So like I had no clue he was talking about 3 hours and 30 minutes. Greeny, it would take me all day.
Well, listen, it would take me the rest of my life. I'm not doing it. So I have zero interest in doing it. I'm not doing it.
Don't you want to push yourself physically at some point?
I wrote an entire book so as not to have to run a marathon. I'll tell you that story.
You avoided the question. Do you ever want to push yourself physically in anything?
Yes.
How?
Not that way. I can tell you right now. I can think of any number of ways that I would like to push myself physically that do not involve running 26.2 miles. But we do wish Stanzik very good luck. The number one trending topic in the United States right now is Seinfeld taught me, which is funny. And because, I'm a Seinfeld addict. And we were just talking a minute ago about how Stanzik is going to run a marathon.
Right.
And there's a legendary – did you watch Seinfeld?
A little.
There's a legendary Seinfeld episode in which Jean-Paul is running the marathon and he's in town. And he slept through the marathon famously before, and Elaine is in charge of making sure he doesn't. And so he sits down in the coffee shop, and Jerry and everyone is trying to figure out what it was. Was it the AM, PM? Was it the snooze? All those kinds of questions, and it's very funny. And then, anyway, it's a very good episode. So Stanzik is running. So Stanzik, what means of making sure you wake up on time are you utilizing on Sunday morning? Because obviously it's just an alarm clock and a phone. Yeah, there were no iPhones at the time that episode was filmed.
Well, yeah, hopefully Stanzik can hydrate and get the right nutrition and make sure you handle your business early in the morning. That way you don't run into situations like I did this morning.
Yeah, again, Booger had some issues this morning. We're going to get into those with Stu Gatz. Would you Could you run a marathon? I mean, you played football, so you've got a variety of
could I
injuries.
run a marathon? Don't you disrespect me like that? I was a
What does that
world-class
mean?
athlete.
You said this morning that you woke up and you were going to run 1.5 miles.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you would have to do that like 12 times to run a marathon.
Well, that's probably a little bit more than that.
I don't know. So you tell me, much more than what am I talking about? That would be 2.5. You'd have to. Whatever. Let's not make this about me, okay?
Okay. I mean, let's do that.
Let's go back to making this about you.
Okay.
Could you run a marathon? If I said to you, Booger, I will donate $100,000 to the charity of your choosing if you run a marathon, would you do it?
Yes, I would and could do it. Now, Stanzik said, 3:30?
He said he wants to run it in 3.5 hours.
Yeah, probably like 5 hours. I could do it, though.
I mean, I guess if you forced me to, I could. I would not want to at all. I wrote an entire book so as not to.
Yeah.
And I've told this story on the air before, but when my friend Heidi died, I really wanted to do something in her honor to raise money for cancer. And my first idea was I would run a marathon and I would solicit donations for the V Foundation. And I so didn't want to run a marathon that I wrote an entire book and have been donating all of the money from that all this time. But, I mean, a book takes 2 years in my case to write. And all that kind of stuff. But I did that rather than run a marathon.
I would just load up on peanut butter. I would carb up, load up.
That'd be a delight.
Oh, it would. And I love peanut butter. And so
I know you do, but all the runners I know these days, they're loading up on the peanut butter.
Yeah, peanut butter would be great, phenomenal, smooth, not crunchy. And I think I could get through it, Green. I'd grind. See, here's the thing about me and you. Like, both of us are mentally tough in different ways.
Okay.
We're physically tough in different ways, but our physical level of pain is where we start to differentiate each other. I think I can stand and take pain way more than you can. I think you would start feeling pain probably around mile 4 in this marathon.
I'm still waiting for the part of this in which my physical toughness. I don't claim to be physically tough in any way.
But I think there's some level. I know you say you don't have much, but there's some level of toughness.
Okay.
Like you're tough. If you got a paper cut, you're not going to stay out of work for a week. Okay.
No, but it does bother me terribly.
Okay.
And there's that commercial they show now where the woman gets the paper cut on her tongue, licking an envelope, and I have to look away every time. It bothers me a lot.
Really?
I'm not a big fan of the paper cut. By the way, for Jean-Paul, it was separate knob. Why separate knob? Why separate knob? All right, let's bring in someone else who knows all about that and would have been watching the Jet game last night. And I'm not sure if he would have watched it with delight or dismay from the Dan Le Batard Show with Stu Gatz. Here he is, the one and only Stu Gatz, with us on Mike and Mike. Good morning, Stu Gatz.
Good morning, Greeny. Good morning, Booger. Greeny, there's no way. Booger, you are delusional, man. There is no way. I mean, you think you can beat Lee Trevino in golf. There is no way you can run a marathon. No way, Booger.
Stu, I could run the marathon. It would just take me a lot longer than the 3:30 that I thought Stanzik was going to start the marathon, but he's actually going to finish it in 3:30.
Booger, you went for a 2-mile jog today that you really couldn't get through because you had to go back to the bathroom, and you got lost. I mean, there's no way you're running a marathon, man.
Well,
I want to see you do it.
It was dark also, Stu. That's the thing that you're not kind of adding into the story. It was dark.
Yeah.
I had a hoodie on, and I forgot to finish what I should have finished early that morning.
Right, that's why I have a rule. I don't stray too far away from the bathroom early in the morning. Like, Booger, because things start rumbling when you start running and, you start exercising, and you just got to be really close to a bathroom. That's a big mistake. Like, you should have just went to the gym. I know exactly where you stayed up there in Bristol. There's a gym right near your room. You should have just went to the gym. That way you're closer to a bathroom.
I wanted fresh air. Like, I really wanted to be outside. It's a balmy 60 degrees. And, Stu, guys, tell me what the temperature is in Miami right now.
Oh, it's like, I would say it's like 65 this morning. It's beautiful out. Like, I'm going to get a full 18 holes in right after the show today.
See, I can't fathom it. And Stu Gatz, you're a New York guy, so that's the thing. We opened the show, and we're going to get to the football in a second here. But we opened the show this morning talking about how those of us who are from where I'm from and Stu, where you're from, I can't fathom life like that. Like, it's too delightful. Like, life isn't allowed to be so good that in January and February it's 60 degrees and 70 degrees and 80 degrees. But you made the move down there, and listen, God bless you for it. You're the smart one, and I'm the dumb one because you're down there playing 18 holes of golf, and I'm freezing my tuchus off.
Yeah, I did it 20 years ago, Greeny, so I'm kind of, I'm used to it now. My blood is thinned out. I get really cold when I go up north, especially in the winter. But Greeny, you can't fathom November, December, January, February, where it's not cold, where it's not snowing. And I'm telling you, Here's the best way I could describe it to you. It's heavenly to not have to go through that. Like, our winter is unbelievable. It's 70 degrees, not a cloud in the sky every single day. And so if you can't fathom it, here, I'll explain it to you with one word. Heavenly. That's what it is. And, Mike, you should move down here. I'm thinking you should move down here, Mike. You love
I'm
golf
thinking
so much
the same thing. Every single year when it gets cold here, I think exactly the same thing. Anyway, let's get to business here. As you watched the Jets last night dominate the Bills, and that's what they did. They dominated that football game behind Josh McCown and Matt Forte, who neither of whom are going to be on the team whenever it is they become whatever it is they eventually hope to be. In your mind, as a fan of the team, do you believe that winning games right now, as they are doing at a rate that is surprising to everyone, do you think in the big picture that's a good thing or a bad thing? Are you rooting for them or against them?
I'm rooting against them last night, Greeny. I was rooting against them last night. I reach a point in every season where I start rooting against my team, and last night was the point where I started rooting against the New York Jets, because the only way to get better in the NFL is by being really, really bad. Now, you would think the Jets would be good by now because they've been really, really bad forever, but I was rooting for them to lose. Listen, they win games that you want them to lose. They lose games that you want them to win. And Greeny, a lot of things could have been different headed into last night. The interesting thing about this team is it feels like this team could be and probably should be 6-3 based on the last 3 or 4 weeks. They had the Dolphins up 17 on the road in the fourth quarter in that game. It's a game they probably should have won. So had they won a couple of those games, I would have been rooting for the Jets last night. But to do what they did last night, which is maybe play their best game of the season, a game they probably should lose because, again, to get better, you have to be really bad in the NFL. The Jets are going to be the worst possible thing this year, Greeny. And I'm interested to hear how you experienced last night's game. Because I always say, be 0-16 or 60-0, 1-15 or 15-1. But in the NFL, you cannot be 8-8. And when we have guys talking about maybe the best quarterback draft since the 80s, I want the Jets to lose as many games as possible. But unfortunately, that's not going to be the case here, Greeny. They're going to do just enough to have like the 14th pick in the NFL draft.
That's probably true. And as a consequence of that, Field Yates brought up an interesting thought.
Yep.
He said, right now, Todd Bowles could be considered the NFL's Coach of the Year. Agree or disagree?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Greeny, I remember having the conversation with you before the season where you said the Jets would be lucky to win a game or two. Yeah. And I told you the NFL was weird and sometimes strange things happen in the NFL, and here the Jets are sitting here and, I guess you could say they're in playoff contention. But, I mean, you have to consider – I know we usually give it to a coach who's won 10 games or more. I heard Field say that, and that's accurate. But you have to consider Todd Bowles here. We'll see how the rest of the season goes. But when you consider that his quarterback is Josh McCown, his running back is Matt Forte, both guys north of 30. Yes, you have to consider Todd Bowles. And there's not a superstar in the entire team. Not one. You can't. Jamal Adams will be a superstar. He is not a superstar yet. Certainly Todd Bowles has to be in that discussion for NFL Coach of the Year.
Stugotz, I think there are some organizations in sports, namely football, that have wasted talent. You look at Minnesota when they had Adrian Peterson, to a certain extent Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. I thought they should have won more championships by now. Looking at Indianapolis with Andrew Luck, I think they're wasting his talent by the lack of talent they put around him, and now he's hurt by large because they don't have enough offensive line help for him. What do you make of the organization, the Indianapolis Colts, and how they put talent around Andrew Luck?
Booger, I'm completely with you. Like, they had this quarterback. They had, a guy that was being compared to John Elway when he came out of college. We all saw it, the one great year that he had. We all saw how good Andrew Luck could be. And to not surround that guy, to not protect that guy with the best possible offensive line. Forget about surrounding him with skill position talent. Protect that guy. And that's on the Colts. That's on Ryan Grigson, who was the GM there for the Colts for a while. That's totally on him, and I'm completely with you. I just can't figure out. I've never heard of anything like this, Booger. Have you? Like a botched surgery, and now we're having conversations about whether or not Andrew Luck will ever play football again. And I know they're denying that, but those are the conversations that people are having. This is a strange one, Booger. I can't recall a time where I've seen a guy have his surgery, because what do we hear after a guy has surgery? That was a successful surgery. We never hear the doctor come out and say, hey, you know what? That was an unsuccessful surgery. We have no idea if he's ever going to play again. This was successful by everyone's account. And, Booger, I've never heard of an example. I can't think of another story where a guy got surgery on his shoulder, and now maybe his career is in jeopardy, and at the very least he's going to miss the remainder of this year. But I'm with you. I put this entirely on the Colts.
How about what happened with Deshaun Watson yesterday?
Oh, Greeny, unbelievable. We said it on Monday. I'm not certain Deshaun Watson wasn't the most exciting thing to watch week in and week out in the NFL. And you don't have a lot of that right now in the NFL. The quarterback play is not great. You had Aaron Rodgers. He went down. You still have Tom Brady, of course. But Deshaun Watson, that Sunday game against the Seahawks, 4 o'clock, that might have been the most entertaining game of the NFL season. In fact, I will tell you, it was the most entertaining game of the NFL season. I just felt awful for him, felt awful for the Texans. And then, my mind, because all things for me comes back to the Patriots and Tom Brady. So here's what I was thinking when I heard that it happened. Deshaun Watson, hurt. Aaron Rodgers, hurt. Andrew Luck, hurt. All these guys, with the exception of Rodgers, who's in his 30s, these guys are in their 20s. And here's Tom Brady at 40. He's had one injury his entire career. And outside of suspensions, he's played 16 games every single season. The one quarterback standing tall, healthy, playing better than he ever has, is a 40-year-old guy up in New England. And that's what I was thinking. These young guys can't stay healthy, but there's a 40-year-old up in New England playing as well as he's ever played and never gets hurt.
Stu, you being from Miami, would definitely love to get your thoughts on Dwayne Wade, now up in Cleveland with LeBron. They're struggling, man. And Dwayne Wade basically said, yeah, it's okay. We're going through the same growing pains that we did down here in Miami. Are you buying that?
Right. No, that would suggest that Dwayne Wade and LeBron James are the same players they were down here in Miami, and they're not. They're not even close. That's like, it's ludicrous for Wade to say that. He's coming off the bench. Dwayne Wade, Booger, here's what Dwayne Wade needs to do. He needs to take his shirt off and stand in front of a mirror and look at how much weight he has gained. Because this is not the same Dwayne Wade. It is not the same LeBron James. They are not going through the same thing they went down here the first season with the Miami Heat. For the most part, with the exception of Wade, a lot of these guys have played together and have done so for the last 3 years or so with LeBron James. This is not the same thing. Wade is not the same player. LeBron, I guess you could say he probably still is the same player, maybe even better LeBron James than he was when he came down here to play that first season in Miami. But this is all about Wade. And Wade is not the same, and he's never going to be the same, and they're not going through anything in comparison to what they went through that first season with the Heat, simply because we all knew. We were confident. I don't care. We were all confident. We knew Wade was in his prime, LeBron was in his prime, Bosh was in his prime, and even though they got off to that slow start, we all knew they would figure it out. But there is no one that can sit here today and say they are confident the Cavaliers are going to figure this out.
Mike and Mike Stugatz with us on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. We are presented by Progressive Insurance, and let's play our little game here we call Beef Stew. Do you have, on the subject, more beef with LeBron staying quiet on his future, or with Maverick Carter saying that he has no idea where LeBron is going to play next year?
Oh, it's Maverick Carter. Greeny, I've told you this for years. The guy, they are so calculated. Maverick and Rich Paul and LeBron James, so calculated with their business decisions, their off-the-court decisions. I am telling you right now, LeBron knew he was coming to Miami years before. And think about this. He has no idea, guys. That last game he played in Cleveland against the Celtics before he came down to Miami, and Maverick saying he has no idea right now. He took his jersey off right after that. The second the game was over, he took that Cavalier jersey off, and he knew right then and there that he was leaving Cleveland and coming down to Miami. And if you believe Stephen A. Smith, and of course I do, who wouldn't? He's as credible as they come when it comes to the NBA and his sources. LeBron was plotting his exit from Miami back to Cleveland 2 years before he left and actually did it. LeBron James knows exactly where he's playing right now. He knows exactly where next year, where he's going to live, where he's going to be playing. He knows it right now. He's probably known it for a while. And the fact that Maverick Carter came out and merely suggested that LeBron James has no idea is complete. It's asinine, to be quite honest with you, because anyone who knows LeBron James knows he knows exactly where he's going to play, and he knows exactly what city he's going to live in, and he knows it right now, and he's probably known it for the last year or so.
Is it L.A.?
I think it's L.A., personally. I do. I think it's L.A. I think he wants to be there. I wish it was the Knicks. It's not going to be there. But I think it's L.A. I think he's taking a look at Brandon Ingram and Lonzo Ball, and if he can get, a Paul George or one of those guys to kind of come over there with him, then and Chris Paul maybe, who's on a one-year contract, then yes, I could see those guys playing for the L.A. Lakers.
All right, and now I'm looking forward to this one. Do you have more beef, Stugatz, with the Browns wanting A.J. McCarron or with them screwing up the trade?
Oh, with them wanting A.J. McCarron in the first place. I mean, this is just absolutely amazing. Like the day after, first off, the Browns are going to have the first or second pick in the NFL draft, and it's a great quarterback draft. And the San Francisco 49ers, who only gave up a second-round pick to get Jimmy Garoppolo from the Patriots, they don't need a quarterback anymore. They have their quarterback for the future. So you're going to have your pick of quarterback in next year's NFL draft. Your pick, whoever you want. You can have him. He's yours. Why would you trade a second and a third-round pick to get a guy who's had 3 or 4 starts in the NFL, and we have no earthly idea if he's going to be any good? You know, it's amazing. The Patriots trade a second-round pick to get Jimmy Garoppolo, and then the next day, the Browns reportedly offering a second and third for AJ McCarron, who, in my mind, is nowhere near as good as Jimmy Garoppolo. So, and why would you do it? You're going to have any quarterback you want next year in the draft because the team that might take another quarterback, the San Francisco 49ers, no longer need one. And Mike Ryan, our executive producer, who's a Browns fan, he is a lifelong Browns fan. He was actually happy. He was celebrating that the Browns screwed that thing up because he didn't want that deal. He didn't want to give up a 2 and a 3 for AJ McCarron. So
an interesting
I get
thought.
on the Browns for even offering that. That's absurd for AJ McCarron.
It's easy to say, I'm not disputing you, that Garoppolo is better than A.J. McCarron. And he was drafted way ahead of A.J. McCarron. He looked very good in a very short sample size on a very good team. McCarron looked decent in a slightly larger sample size on a much less good team. Mm-hmm. Do we know for sure, Booger McFarland, that Jimmy Garoppolo is better than A.J. McCarron?
I think we know that the tutelage that he's gotten is better.
Right.
And I think we will feel confident saying that because of that, he has an opportunity to be better. Bill Belichick, for whatever reason, he knows him better than anybody. He loves Jimmy Garoppolo. To me, the whole A.J. McCarron thing is an indictment on all the quarterbacks that the Browns have there. I think if you're Deshaun Kaiser, if you're Kessler, if you're the guys that they have there, to me, I'd be concerned the fact that they'd be willing to give up 2 draft picks to bring in another quarterback after they took one basically the last couple of years. I'd be concerned if I was any guy on that roster right now.
All right, that's Stu Gatz again. You'll hear him every single day following us along with the Dan Le Batard Show and company coast to coast here on ESPN Radio. Thank you, Stu Gatz. Enjoy the weather.
Thanks, Stu.
All right. Thank you, guys. And Booger, remember, life lesson here. Don't stray too far away from a bathroom in the morning. You got it?
Those are words to live by. It's not just the morning. I think
you can't stay by the bathroom all day.
Yes, you can.
No, you can't.
You can remain as close to a bathroom as possible pretty much in every minute of your life.
That's not true, Greeny. If you're driving down the interstate, you're nowhere near a bathroom.
No, what? You are near enough. You see the signs. You pay at always. You are ever watchful of the signage that suggests to you how close the nearest rest stop is and what your other emergency precautions are. And if you're going to be in the car for a significant, you have emergency precautions that already exist. If you know what I mean.
I don't.
You are prepared for any eventuality when you get into that car.
No.
Yeah, you need to know what I'm talking about.
Well, I don't.
Well, I will explain it to you during a break because, I mean, this is not the kind of thing that I feel like talking about at great length on the show. But the McCarron thing, I think, is fascinating because everything about that story is weird. Right. From the fact that they were going to give up more for him than the 49ers gave up for Garoppolo to the fact that the explanation for why the trade didn't happen has taken a million different twists and turns, and none of them make sense. Each of them makes less sense than the previous one. So, I mean, I don't know what happened. I really don't. But I do know that it is just another – I didn't think that things could get worse for the Cleveland Browns. I really didn't. Mm-hmm. I really didn't think that they could look worse than they've looked. They do now. They look worse. I mean, the Browns really do look like a joke in a way that I can't think of. What's the last time an NFL team looked this much like just a total laughingstock? I don't like saying that. It makes me feel bad because there are a lot of people that I'm sure that are working very hard. But this story, on top of everything else that has happened, it really does make them just look like a laughingstock.
You know, I know Browns fans don't want to hear this, but I think, Greeny, in order for them to get eventually where they want to go, which is to become respectable in the National Football League, they're going to have to scrap this whole sabermetrics baseball thing, Sashi Brown. Bring in a football guy. Allow a football guy to build a football team.
You're changing the regime again?
Well,
how many times can you do this?
Greeny, there's never a wrong time to do the right thing, okay? So, yeah, I understand you want to continue to change it, but at some point, are you going to continue to go down the wrong path? We see what it is now. They can't even complete a trade.
Yeah.
So are we willing to say, yeah, let's just keep this for the sake of keeping consistency?
What I will say is that you have reached a really interesting point where we would describe it as a step in the right direction if they actually can execute a trade mechanically. If they can actually go through the process of executing a trade and not trading away the rights to a franchise quarterback, those are the two things we're asking them not to do going forward.
The best of Mike and Mike.
The first time we talked to AJ Hinch, he was in a hotel room playing home games in Tampa. Yeah. And here we are a couple of months later getting set to celebrate a World Series championship with a parade in Houston. AJ, congratulations, and thank you very much for doing this today.
No, thank you for having me. You guys are talking football. I'm kind of looking forward to a couple of Saturdays and Sundays that I get to just kick back and watch some football. But after this celebration today, winning the World Series, wow, it's going to be incredible.
Oh, who's your team?
Well, I'm a big Bronco fan, so you start throwing around ideas as somebody's the next John Elway. Now I'm going to start to sit up in my chair.
Mike and Mike, all right, so we only have a couple of minutes with you here, so let me dive into this quickly. When we first spoke, as I mentioned, your team was displaced because your city and your ballpark had been hit by a hurricane. How would you put into your words the journey that your team took from that day to where you were the other night in L.A.?
Man. It's so hard to capture it, accurately in one word or one sentence because this team went through a lot. But this city was really, the ones that rallied around us. And we were the baseball team that was sort of the extension of the city. And we go through the highs and lows of a season. It takes a long time to get to the end of the journey. But we really were resilient throughout the year. We won over 100 games during the season, which sounds like we had this Cinderella story season. But you look back and see the peaks and valleys, the hurricane being the biggest part of our season. It's incredible to be the last team standing.
AJ, can you explain just the impact that a veteran like Justin Verlander had on your ball club when he came over, just how he helped those young guys come along?
Sure. A lot of it was on the field. I mean, obviously he was incredible on the field performance-wise, but I think more than anything, he was just a sort of legitimacy that came with the playoff run that we were about to go on. When you have his jersey hung up and his presence on our team and just the belief that he brings, that we were going to have a chance to win the World Series, it was a different attitude once we traded for him and once he arrived and there wasn't a magic potion or there wasn't this speech or there wasn't a big word. It was just a presence. And his excellence throughout his career, I think, brings the credibility that you need to get refocused to say, hey, listen, we're going to try to go win the World Series. And we just added, a future Hall of Famer and one of the best of all time.
Mike and Mike, AJ Hinch again of the World Series champion Houston Astros. We opened our show yesterday with Eduardo Perez in our studio, and he said that he, watching the telecast, had picked up something in Yu Darvish's pitching motion very quickly. He said that he could tell that his hand moved a little bit in the glove when he was throwing the slider and didn't move in the glove when he was throwing the fastball. He picked that up on TV. Obviously, your team was all over him in the 2 innings he pitched in Game 7. Did your team pick that up too?
We are so familiar with you from his days with the Rangers, and you're trying to pick up every little cue or every chance you can to eliminate a pitch. And I think whether it's a small little cue of a guy's glove or whether it's familiarity of saying, hey, if I see spin, I'm not going to hit and try to ambush his fastball. Our game plan was second to none against him in both games that he pitched. I think most of it came out of familiarity of him being a Texas Ranger and us having 20 and 30 at bats versus necessarily any one sort of key that got us a chance to hit him around.
You guys won this year with a very young team. We saw the Cubs win last year with a young team. They struggled to get back there this year. How do you take this young team, push it forward, and continue some of the success?
Yeah, I think we're just going to have to, get through this celebration first and allow everybody to get through the crazy emotions that come with winning the World Series. And then, we're going to look up and the holidays are going to be here. Most teams that are eliminated have players that are starting their off-season workout program around November 1st. We were playing Game 7 of the World Series. So it's going to be a different approach for us this winter. But we're going to allow ourselves to celebrate this. And then obviously I'll handle spring training, a little differently with the workload of some of our pitchers. But our attitude won't change. I mean, I don't know what my speech will be at the beginning of next season, but it'll be, we'll bury this run that we've made and start afresh.
Mike and AJ Hinch, manager of the Astros. Did you know Carlos Correa was going to propose on the field after you won the World Series?
I did. I'm proud to be really close to our players, and he told me that right before, about an hour before the game, he's like, hey, it kind of comes around and says, hey, we really got to win, and we got to do this for Houston, and we've worked so hard. I hope you're having fun. They check on me and make sure I'm still breathing. And then he pops open this ring and says, by the way, if we win, I'm gonna give Daniela this. I said, well, if I didn't feel pressure before, I feel pressure now. Carlos. We need to win so I don't ruin some marriage proposal. So I was awesome that he confided that in me, and then I have no idea where he kept the ring, or I didn't see it happen on the field with all the craziness. But what a story!
Yeah, and I like a ring you can land a plane on, so that was a very nice all the way around.
So,
anyway,
so did she. I think she loved it too. She said yes.
AJ, you've been just great with us. I mean, I can't tell you how much we appreciate all the time that you have given us over the course of this run, and I can't tell you how happy we are for you and for your entire city. So go celebrate your day. You've certainly deserved this. Congratulations, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks.
Thanks, AJ.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.